Mere days after the Lee family had settled into their new abode, nestled amongst the pines, they are confronted with paranormal happenings. Initially, the disturbances seem harmless, as the couple's two young sons began to voice concerns about peculiar lights flickering in their rooms and eerie shadows dancing across the walls. But the situation takes an ominous turn when Steve and Beth themselves bear witness to disturbing and terrifying events. This is the untold story of the haunted house of the Black Forest in Colorado. There's an undeniable, almost supernatural call to the eerie and the unexplained that seems to emanate from the depths of dense woodlands. The Black Forest, a vast expanse of towering trees and shadowy undergrowth, has been a breeding ground for creepy tales of the otherworldly. Amidst this foreboding landscape lies a dilapidated house, its weathered walls and creaking floorboards harboring secrets that have captured the imagination of paranormal enthusiasts across the nation. This isolated dwelling, nestled deep within the Colorado wilderness, has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted sites in the United States. Its very existence a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the unknown. The region referred to as the Black Forest is an unincorporated area situated in El Paso County, Colorado, nestled near the city of Colorado Springs. This area was traditionally known as the Pineries, a vast expanse spanning over 1,000 miles, aptly named for the dense concentration of majestic ponderosa pine trees that blanketed the landscape. The Black Forest's remote and secluded nature, coupled with its towering evergreens and rugged wilderness, has long captivated those seeking solitude and a connection with the untamed beauty of nature. The secluded log cabin, nestled deep within the Black Forest region of Colorado, seemed like a tranquil oasis for the Lee family when they first laid eyes on it in 1991. Stephen and Beth, along with their two sons, had relocated from Louisiana, seeking a serene escape amidst the towering pines and pristine wilderness. The sparsely populated area, known for its slow-paced lifestyle, crisp air, and breathtaking vistas, promised a dream home surrounded by untouched nature. Little did they know that this idyllic retreat would soon become a source of inexplicable occurrences and unsettling experiences that would forever alter their perception of the supernatural. About the Lees. Stephen Lee, a father, husband, and truck driver, had done well for his family. And wanting a change of scenery, they found what they believed to be their dream home. A 6,000 square foot, 3-story cabin located within the Black Forest. Situated on 5 acres of land, Stephen and his wife Beth, with every step as they surveyed the property, could envision their 2 young sons playing and growing up there, their own little piece of the American dream. So, it took a little bit of time, but their offer on the home was ultimately accepted, and within the coming months, they would soon call this secluded place home. However, they would fail to realize that it wasn't just inhabited by the family of 4. The first week at their new residence seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Mom, Dad, and the kids were all comfortable and very happy after making the long trek from Louisiana to Colorado. And the family themselves seemed happy and content with their decision. However, this would change. The Lees' two young sons shared a room, as brothers often do at a young age. And roughly after their first week, they began to tell their parents that something strange was happening in their bedroom. Bright, colorful lights flashed about, and terrifying, shadowy specters flowed across their walls. These strange happenings frightened the boys and often kept them awake. So, of course, they told their parents. However, often in these situations, they were dismissed. Beth and Steve simply believed that the boys had overactive imaginations and figured it would just take time for them to adjust to their new environment. But this too would change mere weeks later. Upon coming home from an evening of fun as a family, they would arrive to see their home lighting inside with strange, lightning-like flashes of light. They could see the spectacle from their driveway. In the words of Beth, "One day we came home and it was like the 4th of July in our living room and bedroom. We had all sorts of colorful flashes of light seemingly everywhere. We rushed inside to figure out just what these things were, and simultaneously, it sounded like people were stomping across our roof. Then all of a sudden, it stopped." Never having seen anything like this before, the Lees were simply perplexed, and not sure of what to make of this activity. They would lay their heads down to sleep this night, but what they failed to realize is that this was just a prelude of what was to come. In the coming months, the activity grew in intensity. What started as phantom lights and flickering shadows had escalated into something taking place almost every single day. From disembodied banging sounds to whispers, the sound of chains dragging on the floor, or even inside the walls, to pushing, assaulting, and disturbing the family. Sadly, the Lees' young sons were more often than not the targets of this paranormal force that plagued them. Night after night, and almost every night, they were harassed by shadow people, the reappearance of the mysterious lights, and the awful banging sounds of something unseen. The family did their best to make the situation work. They, after all, were newly tied up financially in the purchase of what they believed was going to be their forever home. But it was something big or small nearly every day now that was taking place. During the day, appliances began to turn on and off on their own accord. This was attributed to an electrical issue at first, but after having the home examined by multiple electricians, they found no faulty wiring. Alongside electrical appliances, faucets began to turn on by themselves, often making a wet mess in whatever room they were activated in. During the night, the reemergence of the lights, the movement of the shadow people, and the sounds truly haunted them. And these disturbing happenings were soon coupled by something new and equally terrible. A noxious, chemical odor began to appear in the home with no rational origin. The smell of these mystery chemicals burned the nose, eyes, and throats of everyone whenever it appeared. In the coming days, yet more professionals would be called out, and yet nothing, no origin of the chemicals or detection of them either, could be found. It seemed that whatever force that dwelled within the walls of the cabin home in the woods had a particular hatred for the Lee family, and this force soon began to physically hit all of them, seemingly whenever it could, often leaving bruises. Not a believer in the paranormal, Steve Lee, having had professionals come out and not provide any rational answers to their strange ailments. This, coupled with the now daily torment that he and his family were enduring, had finally reached his wit's end. He wanted to prove that either there was someone or something messing with them, and over the coming year, he invested in a total of $70,000 worth of camera equipment and security equipment to monitor every square inch of their home and property. Now, you might think that that's an incredible amount of money to spend on cameras and alarm systems, and it is. But this was the 90s. The equipment wasn't as readily available or sophisticated as it is today, and it just goes to show that they were truly freaked out by whatever was taking place, that they wanted some kind of tangible proof that they could show the world so people didn't think that they were crazy. The cameras, which were mostly motion activated and would record when motion was detected, soon began to activate with no rational explanation and no physical means to be detected. After capturing several strange things on video and photograph, Steve decided to contact the local authorities for help. Records show that the El Paso police were contacted so often by the Lees in the months to come that they launched a formal investigation into just what was taking place at the cabin home in the Black Forest. During this time and the 2 years to follow, alongside the cameras, their security equipment, which could detect motion and forced entry, was triggered 62 times with no explanation as to what could be causing it. It wasn't faulty equipment or poor installation. It was oddly something else, something unexplainable. With not even the police able to rationalize what was happening to the Lees, Beth and Steve decided to take things one step further. They hired a private investigator. This was in part due to the police also growing tiresome, being contacted for assistance, and then there being nothing that they could do about it. Between the cameras and security equipment, and now hiring a private investigator, the Lees had all but spent the rest of their life savings. Most people, if it ever came to this, would simply try and cut their losses and sell the home. And we don't know if the Lees could have sold the home and moved elsewhere, but they truly still believed that this massive cabin home was their dream home, and they didn't want to give it up without a fight. Unfortunately, though, the private investigator was unable to help them. This left the Lees to simply tough out anything and everything that they had and were continuing to experience. After moving in 1991, the year now was 1995, and the activity had persisted despite the efforts of the Lee family to uncover just what was causing it. Steve, who still figured there had to be a rational explanation for what was taking place, had a little bit more of an open mind after a lengthy discussion with Beth. Seemingly having done everything else, the Lees concluded that they would try and contact paranormal investigators to see if they could do anything about the otherworldly happenings taking place in their home. After some research and calling numerous numbers, the Lees ended up getting in contact with a person who would end up being involved with the television show Sightings. Sightings was an American paranormal and news show that aired throughout the 1990s, covering various unexplained and fringe phenomena. As a result of this pretty lucky interaction, the show became very interested in producing an episode segment about hauntings surrounding the investigation of the Lee home. The show would contact a paranormal investigator and a self-proclaimed psychic in Minneapolis, Minnesota, named Echo Bodine. From her book, The Little Book of True Ghost Stories, Echo would explain her experience as the following. I got a call from the TV show Sightings, and they wanted to know if I would fly to Colorado Springs to help a family deal with some ghosts. The producers told me that the problem was the ghosts mostly seemed to come out at night, so I was asked to work from midnight until the early daybreak hours. It was a very hot day in mid-July when I arrived in Denver around 10 p.m. It was pretty eerie. There was intense lightning all throughout the sky and rain pouring down. I remember thinking how perfect the spooky weather was for investigating hauntings. Steve, the owner of the log home, was at the airport to pick me up. He was very open about not believing in ghosts. And as we drove through several towns in Colorado, I listened to him tell me story after story about some of the things that had gone on in their house. They heard voices, footsteps. Things would move from room to room. It took close to an hour to get up to their house in the mountains. And alongside the rain, a fog hung about 10 feet off the ground. When we arrived and I entered their 3-story log cabin home, from here I was greeted by a producer who asked me if I could take a seat while the scientist they had hired told us about his thermal camera. Having been tired from the trip, I laid my head back while the explanations were continuing. And suddenly, I heard a voice come from behind me. It said, "Hey, come here." Upon turning around, I saw a large ghostly man. About 6 feet tall, the specter was wearing blue jeans and a blue checkered flannel shirt. I then heard in unison multiple voices tell me to look over here. And now there was 5 male spirits, all different, but dressed the same as the first. The original ghost said that his name was Tom, and that this was his house, and that no one was going to make him leave. He ran the show around here and had for a long time. I told the producer what was happening in case he wanted to capture anything for the segment, and he did. The conversation then ensued, with Tom explaining why he and the boys wanted to stay in the house, that it was his land, his home, and that he would not leave. One of the cameramen then asked if it was one of them who had been responsible for knocking over his very expensive camera off the countertop. All 5 in unison answered yes, and then disappeared out of sight. The scientist with the thermal camera did in fact capture a drop in temperature just right where Tom had stood. Around 2 a.m. in the morning, as me and Beth discussed the activity that she had experienced, the dogs the family owned would not stop barking outside. The producers, in an effort to keep their sounds from being picked up on the camera, tried to quiet them down, but simply weren't having any luck. Then, upon Beth showing me a photo of what they had captured on their own cameras, we suddenly were in the midst of 3 male spirits. One with a particularly angry scowl upon his face. One of them walked through both of us, causing us to jump out of our chairs, while the other, angry-looking spirit tried to take my breath away. I believe he did this to stoke fear from me in order to grow more powerful, and this worked because I felt as if I was being suffocated. By 3:30 a.m., we all decided to not focus on ghosts for a bit and to try and lighten the mood. We turned the cameras off and began eating some food in which Beth had prepared for us. but almost as soon as we began to relax, one of the camera women who had been sitting on the stairs began to hyperventilate. She then jumped up and screamed, "Get it out of me," as she fell down the stairs and onto the floor, writhing in pain. The producers asked for me to do something, so with the assistance of others, I helped her up and into a chair in the kitchen, and I began to burn sage, encircling her in the smoke. I asked her to say back to me that she was clear until she calmed down. It took about 20 minutes, but she eventually relaxed. She then was given a ride back to the hotel, and I never saw or heard from her again. By now it was 4:30 a.m., and we were waiting for the camera crew of the show to finish setting up their equipment in the bedrooms, where the majority of activity was seeming to take place. One of Steve's friends, who had been present most of the night, came up and handed me a brochure about the history of the local area. To my surprise, he told me that a man named Tom had been the sheriff here back in the 1800s. I felt shivers up my spine as I realized that this was the same Tom that now haunted the Lees' home. Roughly 5 a.m., as we set off to investigate the last bedroom, I walked into the room and saw there in the rocking chair in the corner who would turn out to be Beth's deceased grandmother. And on the opposite side of the room was Tom and the several male spirits under his control. We ended up burning sage and asking them all to move on to the other side. They all did leave the building, but I'm not convinced that they moved on. At about 6 a.m., we finally finished saging the entire house. Exhausted, we packed up our equipment and went back to our respective hotels. I've spoken to Steve and Beth since, and they informed me that activity at the cabin persisted shortly after our departure, and that although not fully convinced, Steve is convinced that there are things in this world that we will never truly understand. Sightings would do a follow-up episode segment years later with the Lees, where they brought in several spiritualists and an expert in hyperdimensional studies, and all would come to the conclusion that the home was indeed haunted. The expert would draw the conclusion that the home sat atop an interdimensional vortex, and coinciding with his conclusion, interestingly, a Hopi elder from the local area would also explain that the Black Forest sits on top what the Hopi call a rainbow vortex, a raging storm, a portal of sorts that contains great spiritual energy and the coming and going of many souls. Sometimes they burn out over time, and sometimes they don't. They are considered gateways between the world of the living and the spirit realm. Some strange and noteworthy things that took place during the second filming of the show Sightings at the Lees' residence was that a paranormal investigator had asked anyone if the name Howard bore any significance to them. The Lees were surprised because one of their best friends in Colorado Springs was a man named Howard. The entity then told the investigator, who relayed the information to everyone, that he was Howard's son, and that he in fact had not killed himself, but rather had been murdered. This disturbed the Lees a great deal because Howard's son had supposedly taken his own life by consuming deadly chemicals, working as a chemist. The stories and reputation of the home got such a local buzz from the press that even a Colorado senator by the name of Charles Duke visited the home with his own camera crew and would snap a few photographic pieces of evidence of apparitions, to his and everyone else's surprise. Senator Duke was so convinced of the Lees' haunting that he even contacted the FBI to conduct a formal investigation, but the Bureau would rebuttal with, no federal laws had been broken. Years later, after everything had happened, Steve Lee, who still wasn't fully convinced of the supernatural, came to his own conclusions as to what was taking place. And for the record, it's a wild theory. He began to believe that the government was using his family and their remote location to test biological agents and psychological weapons of war. He claims he has even photographed military personnel on his property with firearms, and claims that they may have been shutting off the electricity in his home so they could enter undetected. These claims, although far-fetched, would be incredibly disturbing if true, and it would account for the noxious odors the family said they were experiencing, as well as the lights and some sounds. But oddly enough as well, the Air Force Base is located just a few minutes away from where the Lees live. The Lees, as far as we know, after placing the home for sale in 2010, no longer live there. The current residents are unknown, but it seems as if the property has changed hands multiple times. Whether it was ghosts, the result of what the Hopi call a rainbow vortex, or more sinisterly, the result of government military black ops. The haunting of Black Forest, Colorado is truly an intriguing tale. And if you find yourself seduced by what you could consider your dream home, take caution, because this calling might just be a siren sound. Don't let them take you. Thank you guys so much for watching this brand new episode. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, leave me a comment, subscribe with notifications on, and please share this around online or with a friend. All that stuff helps me out tremendously. Another thank you to today's sponsor, Keeps. Make sure to check my link down below. I love all of you guys, and thank you so much for everything. Until next time, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to please stay safe out there, and take care.